The night was heavy with rain as Chike sat alone in his dimly lit room, staring at the glowing screen of his phone. The message he had just received left him restless. It was from his mother-in-law, Madam Ngozi, and it read, "Come to my house tomorrow morning. We need to talk about something important. Don't tell your wife." Chike read the message again, confused and uneasy. Madam Ngozi wasn't the type to send cryptic messages. She was a stern woman who rarely smiled, her words always sharp like a blade. Ever since he married Nneka, Madam Ngozi had never hidden her disapproval of him. She believed her daughter deserved a man who was more accomplished, someone who could afford the luxurious lifestyle she had imagined for Nneka. Chike sighed and locked his phone. His one-bedroom flat in Surila felt smaller that night, the walls seeming to close in on him. What could Madam Ngozi possibly want? Was it another lecture about how he wasn't good enough for her daughter? Or maybe she had found another reason to accuse him of failing as a husband. The next morning, Chike arrived at her house with a sense of dread. The large compound in Ikoyi was quiet, except for the soft hum of the generator. He parked his aging Toyota Corolla by the gate and hesitated before stepping out. Madam Ngozi greeted him at the door with an unexpected smile. Her usual cold demeanor was gone, replaced by warmth that felt unsettling. She was dressed in a flowing red wrapper and a blouse that seemed too elegant for a casual morning. "Chike," she said, her voice smooth. "Thank you for coming." Chike cleared his throat. "Good morning, Ma. Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," she replied, ushering him in. "I just wanted us to have a private conversation." As she led him into the sitting room, Chike couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The air felt thick with unspoken words, and the way Madam Ngozi's eyes lingered on him sent shivers down his spine. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the couch. "We have a lot to discuss." Chike sat down, his heart racing as Madam Ngozi poured him a glass of juice. The way she looked at him like a predator sizing up her prey made him want to run. But his legs felt heavy, rooted to the ground. "Chike," she began, her tone low and deliberate. "I've been thinking a lot about you." Her words sent a chill down his spine. What was happening? Why did her voice sound so intimate? Before he could respond, she leaned forward, her eyes locked on his, and whispered, "I see you. Chike, I know what you need." Chike's throat went dry. Whatever was happening here, it was nothing he had ever prepared for. Chike's heart pounded like a drum. He stared at Madam Ngozi, trying to decipher the meaning behind her words. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as her gaze burned into him. "Ma, I don't understand," he stammered, forcing a weak smile. "What exactly do you mean?" Madam Ngozi leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs slowly, a sly smile playing on her lips. "Don't play dumb with me, Chike. You're not a child. You're a man." Chike swallowed hard, his palms sweating. The way she spoke, the tone of her voice, it was unlike anything he'd ever heard from her. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way out of this unsettling situation. I think I should go, Ma," Chike said, rising from the couch. "Sit down." Her voice snapped like a whip, and Chike froze. The authority in her tone was unmistakable. Slowly, he sank back into the couch, his heart thudding louder than before. Madam Ngozi's smile returned, but this time it was softer, almost sweet. "Relax, Chike. I'm not trying to harm you. I just want to talk." Chike nodded nervously, but his instincts screamed that something was wrong. "Okay, Ma. I'm listening." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I've been watching you, Chike. You're a good man, a hard-working man, but I know how Nneka treats you." Chike's brow furrowed. "Ma, what are you talking about?" "She doesn't appreciate you," Madam Ngozi said, her tone almost conspiratorial. "She complains about you behind your back. She tells her friends you're not man enough, that you can't give her the life she wants." Chike's chest tightened. The words hit him like a blow, but he wasn't sure if they were true. Was this some kind of test, a trap? I'm telling you this because I care, she continued, her voice softening. You deserve better, Chike. You deserve someone who sees your worth, someone who values you. Chike stared at her, struggling to find the right words. Ma, Nneka is my wife. I love her, and… Do you? She interrupted, her eyes narrowing. Do you really love someone who looks down on you? Someone who doesn't even respect you as a man? Chike felt his anger rise, but he bit his tongue. Ma, with all due respect, I don't think this is appropriate. Madam Ngozi chuckled, a low, almost mocking sound. Appropriate. Let me tell you something, Chike. Life isn't about what's appropriate. It's about what you need. She leaned closer, so close he could feel her breath on his skin. And I know what you need. Chike shot to his feet, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. I think I should go. But before he could take a step, Madam Ngozi grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. You're not going anywhere, Chike, not until you hear everything I have to say. Chike froze, his mind racing. He realized, in that moment, that he had walked into something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Chike stood frozen, staring at Madam Ngozi's hand gripping his wrist. Her touch was firm yet deliberate, her nails gently pressing into his skin. His instincts screamed at him to pull away, to run. But the weight of her gaze pinned him in place. Sit down, Chike, she said, her voice calm but commanding. You owe me that much. Reluctantly, he sat, his heart racing like a trapped animal. Madam Ngozi released his wrist and leaned back, her expression unreadable. The air between them felt suffocating, thick with tension. You think I'm just here to ruin your peace, don't you? She asked, tilting her head slightly. But you don't understand. I'm trying to help you. Help me how? Chike asked, his voice shaky. She smiled faintly, a dangerous glint in her eyes. By showing you what it means to be truly valued. Ma, this is wrong, Chike said, shaking his head. I can't. Wrong. She interrupted, her tone sharp. Is it wrong to want what's best for you? To want to give you the appreciation you deserve? Chike clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. I don't need your appreciation. Nneka is my wife, and I love her. Please, let me go. Madam Ngozi laughed softly, a sound that sent chills down his spine. You're loyal, I'll give you that. But loyalty doesn't pay the bills. Chike, loyalty doesn't give you peace of mind. When your wife mocks you behind your back. Her words stung, but Chike refused to let her see his doubt. Whatever problems I have with my wife are between us, Ma. I don't need your intervention. Madam Ngozi's expression hardened. You're stubborn, just like I thought. But let me tell you something. Chike, I've lived long enough to know when a man is struggling. You can lie to yourself, but you can't lie to me. She leaned forward again, her voice dropping to a whisper. What do you think will happen when Nneka finally decides she's tired of you? When she leaves you for someone who can give her what she wants? Chike flinched, her words cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. That's not going to happen, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Are you sure? She asked, her eyes boring into his. You don't have to answer now. Just think about it. She stood abruptly, her wrapper swishing around her ankles as she moved toward the door. Take your time, Chike, but remember, I'm always here for you, whenever you're ready. Without another word, she left the room, leaving Chike alone with his thoughts. He stared at the half-empty glass of juice on the table, his mind spinning. What had he just gotten himself into? And how was he supposed to escape a web this dangerous? Chike avoided Madam Ngozi's calls for days, trying to shake off the weight of her words. But no matter how hard he tried, her voice echoed in his mind, I know what you need. It clung to him like a stubborn stain, invading his thoughts even when he was with Nneka. Chike, are you okay? Nneka asked one evening as they ate dinner. Her tone was sharp, but her eyes hinted at genuine concern. "I'm fine," he mumbled, not meeting her gaze. "You've been acting strange lately," she said, frowning. "If something is wrong, just say it." "I said I'm fine," Chike snapped, his voice louder than he intended. Nneka glared at him, but she didn't press further. The tension in the room thickened, and Chike felt a pang of guilt. That night, as Nneka slept beside him, Chike's phone buzzed on the bedside table. He grabbed it quickly, careful not to wake her. It was a message from Madam Ngozi. "You can't avoid me forever. Chike, come tomorrow. It's important." Chike stared at the screen, his hands trembling. He knew he shouldn't go. He should delete the message, block her number, and pretend none of this ever happened. But something inside him, curiosity, fear, or maybe desperation, pushed him to reply, "I'll come." The next morning, Chike found himself standing outside her house again, his heart pounding in his chest. He told himself it was to put an end to this once and for all, to make it clear that he wanted nothing to do with her schemes. Madam Ngozi opened the door, her smile warm and welcoming. "I knew you'd come," she said, stepping aside to let him in. Chike walked into the sitting room, his fists clenched. "I'm here to tell you to stop this nonsense. Whatever you think is going to happen, it won't." She laughed softly, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "Sit down, Chike. Let's talk like adults." "I don't want your wine," he snapped. "Then don't drink it," she replied smoothly, setting the glass on the table. "But at least listen to me." Chike hesitated, then sat down, determined to stay firm. "Say what you have to say, and let me go." Madam Ngozi leaned forward, her expression serious now. "Chike, I'm not the enemy here. I'm just a woman who knows what she wants, and I want you." The words hit him like a slap. Before he could respond, she moved closer, placing a hand on his thigh. Chike froze, torn between outrage and a strange, shameful pull he couldn't explain. "Chike," she whispered, her face inches from his. "Don't fight it. We both know you feel it too." And in that moment, Chike made his first mistake. He didn't push her away. Chike sat in his car outside Madam Ngozi's house, gripping the steering wheel as shame washed over him. What had he done? His mind replayed the events of the previous evening, the moment of weakness that had spiraled out of control. For days, he avoided Nneka entirely, leaving the house early and returning late. But guilt gnawed at him, its claws sinking deeper with every lie he told. He couldn't look Nneka in the eyes. Her laughter, her smile, they felt like daggers, reminding him of his betrayal. Then, one evening, Nneka confronted him. "Chike, what's going on? You've been acting strange. Is there something I should know?" "No, nothing," he said quickly, his voice trembling. "Nothing." Nneka's voice rose. "You barely talk to me. You avoid me like I've done something wrong. Chike, if there's a problem, say it." Chike opened his mouth to speak but stopped himself. How could he tell her? How could he admit he had betrayed her with her own mother? He shook his head, muttering, "I just need some space." "Space," Nneka repeated, her voice breaking. "Chike, are you cheating on me?" The question hit him like a punch, and his silence was all the answer she needed. Tears welled in Nneka's eyes as she stumbled back. "You're unbelievable," she whispered, running out of the room. Chike sank into a chair, his head in his hands. His life was crumbling around him, and he had no one to blame but himself. The next day, Madam Ngozi called him. "We need to talk," she said. "No, we don't," Chike replied, his voice firm. "This was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I can't do this anymore." "You don't have a choice," she said coldly. "If you walk away from me, I'll tell Nneka everything." Chike froze. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," she said, her voice dripping with menace. Desperation clawed at him. He knew Madam Ngozi wasn't bluffing, but before he could respond, the line went dead. That evening, Nneka confronted him again, this time with tears streaming down her face and her phone in hand. "You disgust me," she spat. showing him a message from Madam Ngozi that revealed everything. Chike felt his world collapse. He tried to explain, to beg, but Nneka wouldn't listen. "I never want to see you again," she said, packing her bags and leaving that same night. As the door slammed shut, Chike sat in the silence of their home, realizing he had lost everything: his wife, his dignity, his peace, and all for a moment of weakness. Some prices, he thought bitterly, are too high to pay.